Now, I do want to ask one thing before we go.
Sure.
Because this is like a great conversation. And I just wanted to bring up one thing because it is tied to what we're talking about, which is competition.
Cool. Yeah.
Competition. That's a big factor here. We've talked about it today about evening the playing field between Universal and Disney. My argument, and I know this is probably not a popular one, but I want you guys, I want to hear what you guys think. I don't think competition really weighs too heavily on Disney. I just don't. I think it's more of a fan thing, and I'll tell you why. We've seen evidence of it. California has next to zero competition in the theme park industry. Universal's a half-day park. Let's be honest. Hollywood is not a big thing for Disney. Knott's is a regional thing. It's not huge competition for Disney. Disney does not have really any competition, very, very little in California. And yet Disney continued to invest. In fact, the biggest investment that we saw from Disney in California was in 2012 when they spent $1 billion to redo DCA. And they didn't redo DCA because it was Universal that was pushing them into it. They redid DCA because DCA wasn't doing well. It was competition with itself that motivated Disney, right? And a lot of stuff you see at Disneyland is on par or even better quality wise than you see in Florida. A lot of Floridians, that's where we get the Be Fair to Florida stuff, right?
Yeah.
So my question is how important is competition? Does it really matter? Because we've seen here the evidence of it where it really, Disneyland is thriving without an Island of Adventure down the street. So does Universal need, my point is that is this equation with Universal in Florida necessary? Like, are they that important to Disney, or does it not really matter as much as fans make it out to be? That's my question. What do you think, Dre?
Well, yeah. Okay. So this is kind of an easy one. I think when back in the 80s in the Southern California market especially, competition was really much more at the forefront, right? But you get to be the size and scale that competition really doesn't, at least from Disney's perspective, isn't really at the forefront of everybody's mind. Right. I think the way it does get to the forefront of their mind is if real competition does take hold, like in the form of the Wizarding World East, right? When that actually came up out of the ground, that changed the center of gravity. Right? That's why I kind of use that term, because then people were, hey, let me stay 1 week in Walt Disney World and 2 weeks in Universal, or let me take some of my Walt Disney World days out of my vacation to spend at Universal. Maybe go to Universal first, spend those dollars there. That's kind of how the competition actually gets involved, right? When there is substantive competition that necessitates their attention, that's when competition's on the mind. But until that actually happens, I think it's really honestly, the reason why we get investment out in Disneyland and Walt Disney World, for that matter, is because, like I said, these parks are given a certain amount of capex per year, and they had to have new attractions to bring people back, or to kind of fill up those hotel rooms in Walt Disney World, or to bring people back in Disneyland, right? And have new attractions that people can return to, and that's how you keep people flooding into the parks year after year. So it's more about, I think, that than it is competition, until something competition worthy actually comes out of the ground from any of these other companies.
What do you think, Mr. Family Man? Competition factor, is it as big of a deal as fans make it out to be, or is it kind of a nothing burger?
I think, honestly, the way people use social media, they tend to blow things out of proportion way than really what it is. And I do echo what Dre was saying. I think the terminology for competition is not exactly what people think Disney and Universal's relationship is. I think it's more of that subtlety of, what has altered a family's plans in their vacation. Before, when, Disney was the top dog, down in Florida, before Wizarding World, it was just, if you go to Disney, you go to Disney. If you go to Universal, you go to Universal. Now you see people walking through a Disney hotel carrying Wizarding World bags from Universal. So it's like now it's like everything is intertwining. And I think as a business standpoint, that is where they have to configure to say, okay, how can we kind of bring more people back to say, hey, spend an extra day with us? And that's where I kind of go back to where Disney needs to focus on the parks, because now with Epic Universe being built in Orlando, it's like, okay, Epic Universe, Walt Disney World, new DVC at I'm sorry, Epic Universe at Universal, DVC at Walt Disney World. Which one are you going to go to? And Disney really needs to pick and choose their battles of what they want to go up against, because I mean, this is just speculation on just my behalf. I feel that when Epic Universe opens, it's going to be massive. I mean, Super Nintendo World, the classic Universal Monsters, How to Train Your Dragon. I mean, if they add in another Harry Potter segment to that, I mean, it's just going to be phenomenal, because it's a brand new actual theme park that we haven't seen since Animal Kingdom. Take out Volcano Bay, but it's more like since Animal Kingdom, between Disney and Universal.
Wasn't Islands of Adventure like in 2000?
1999. No. I take that back. Animal Kingdom, then Islands of Adventure.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So, I mean, that's a long stretch of time. So, and then with everything that Disney's going through right now, it's like everything is stacking towards Universal right now, and Disney is going to have to find a way. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be hard, but they're going to have to find a way, because once those numbers start dipping, in the parks, and we've seen it rise up in the quarterly earnings, but
and honestly, like Michael Eisner used to be far more competitive, right? He used to see what other people were doing, right? Like Church Street Station, for example, right? It's like, well, we can't have that. We've got to have Pleasure Island. Or, hey, you know what? Universal's talking about building a park out here in Florida. Well, we gotta have a Studios park, and he would be much more proactive than reactive, right? But as the company has moved along, it's become much more reactive in that way, right? Where it's like, hey, you know what? Let's not invest necessarily until we see how things do with our competition, and then if required, then we'll react, then we'll be more competitive. And we saw that with the like I said, the opening of Wizarding World East. We saw Pandora at Animal Kingdom. We saw even to a certain extent Cars Land out in California. We also saw Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, right? And that came from the competition that we saw in Florida. But honestly, it's like I think they're taking the same look that they did with Islands of Adventure back in 1999. It was just hey, you know what? Let's see what happens with this new park, and then we'll react accordingly.
Yeah. Well, and part of me too kind of wonders, like, the motivation though, like in terms of the reaction of Wizarding World,
right?
If it was actually, oh, we're scared of this new thing that Universal has, or was it more, well, we have our own IP like Star Wars that we can utilize and make the money that Universal's making. Like, it's more of like kind of like the similar approach to like the studios and Netflix, right? Mm-hmm. Where it was like, it wasn't like Netflix was really hurting the film industry, because it wasn't. The film industry was doing just fine with Endgame and huge hits, right? Pre-Pandy.
Yeah.
It wasn't that Netflix was threatening their turf necessarily. It was more like, well, we can get in on this though. We can do our own streamer and make the money Netflix is making. And I wonder if that's more Disney's mentality of like, well, they're not really necessarily hurting us, but we can get in on this gravy train. We got the IP in-house that we can build and make the money they're making down the road.
So the center of I will say the center of gravity did shift, right? They did see an increase in spending at Universal, both with their hotel unit and their merchandise, as compared to Walt Disney World. You did actually see that decline there. It did happen, but you are right in that Universal established the template that Disney would then follow because of the revenue potential it made. Right. So I will agree with you. The motivation behind it may have not been completely competitive. It may have just been, hey, you know what? They were successful doing this. Let's do it ourselves.
Right.
No question. We did see some fall off, though. I mean, it did affect things for a little while, which is why they were so desperate to get some IP in there, which is why they did with James Cameron. Had they owned Star Wars at that time, maybe Pandora never gets built.